Good afternoon, brethren. It's great to be with everybody here today. I was originally scheduled to speak a few months ago, and I prepared this message, and it was a youth message because I was scheduled to speak on Youth Day. But then, lo and behold, it was decided that I am not youthful enough to do that, so I was bumped by our own Winston Snyder. But I still have a message, and I still think that it's relevant and hopefully will be beneficial for our youth, and so I give it to you today. So whether you're 90 like Freeman Immel, or whether you're 9 like Noah Davis or Leah McNeely, I think that it will be understandable and hopefully will be beneficial. Well, the middle of the last century was a difficult time. In the 30s, you could say that it was the rise of dictators. There were dictators in multiple parts of the world who wanted to enslave people, wanted to take over their parts of the world, implement their way of life, and reign as dictators over a bunch of slaves. And one of them was Adolf Hitler. He wanted to destroy God's physical people. He wanted to destroy the Jews. He actually wanted to destroy God's spiritual people also. When I was in Dachau visiting, it wasn't only the Jews and the Gypsies who were in his crosshairs. He had a special category of people that he called Bible studiers, who were also sent to the concentration camps. There was another dictator on another side of the world, and that was Hirohito. He was the emperor of Japan. He also wanted to take over his part of the world, enslave those around him for the glory of Japan. And so it was an age of dictators. And who rose up to defeat these dictators, to fight against them? The United States of America did. And so it was a battle against good versus evil, you could say, to take down these dictators. And we were successful. We freed large parts of the world from their influence. We freed Japan and we freed Germany. I personally am very glad that Germany was freed. But everything was not good. Even though good triumphed over evil, one of our allies was the USSR, Russia. And even though they helped us, they weren't good guys. They were as bad as Hitler was. And so while America was packing up and going home from Japan and going home from Germany, Russia was also in Germany, but they didn't want to go home. They decided they would hold on to Czechoslovakia and Poland and Eastern Germany and make those satellite countries. They wanted to make them into slaves once again. And so how did they do that? They occupied those countries and they built a wall. They built a wall so that the people could not leave. 6 months after the wall came down, I actually got to go to Berlin, and I got to give that piece of the wall, get this piece and cut it off. And so my assistant is going to give it so it can be passed around so people can see it. That is the Iron Curtain, and the people who lived behind the Iron Curtain couldn't get out. If you tried to climb that wall, they would shoot you. Imagine living in the East, waking up, and the wall was under construction, and there were border guards, and you couldn't get out. And if you found yourself in the East, there's a good chance that you suffered starvation, you suffered imprisonment if you wouldn't go along with the government, or if you criticized them. That would have been your life. And even though America wiped out the German concentration camps, others were built by Russia. It was just as bad. Nobody likes to be a slave. We all like to be free. And so, as you can imagine, even when that wall was built, people still wanted to get out. People were getting out before it was built, and afterwards, people especially became urgent about wanting to get out from that dictatorship. And there were many ways that they did it. The first person who escaped was actually a German border guard East German border guard whose job it was to guard the border. It's kind of ironic. He was supposed to keep other people from escaping. He escaped himself. And he did that back when the wall was just barbed wire. They hadn't constructed it all yet. Another person realized East and West Germany, it's all one city. Even though the trains don't go back and forth, the tracks are still there. He got himself a job as a train engineer. He loaded all his friends and family on it, smashed through the barricade on the train, made it to freedom. Another person captured an armored personnel carrier. He got in it, he went through the barricade, made it to freedom. One person had the idea, take all the air out of your tire and remove your windshield, and you can cruise right under the gate before anybody realizes what's going on. The most popular way of escape that was successful was the tunnel escape. East and West were right next to each other. It was one city, and so they dug. You can dig from your own house and dig over, and if you dig far enough, if your calculations are right, you come up and you're free. This is called the Senior Citizens Tunnel because it was many older people who participated in getting it going, and about 50 people escaped using that tunnel. Not all of the wall was in the middle of the city. Some of it was in the countryside where it was only a mesh wire fence. You still had to worry about border guards coming along and dogs, but people would make hooked boots so they could climb over the fence quickly in the boots before the border guards could get them and could shoot them. Now, I have a couple of dates for you when this was happening. The first is 1945. In 1945, that's when the Americans won the war, but that's also when the Russians took over East Germany. The next date is 1961. The wall was not built in 1945. It was built in 1961, 16 years after the Russians took over East Germany and wouldn't let it go. And so, if you lived in 1945 or 1946, you could actually just walk across. They didn't want anybody to leave East Germany. It was still technically a crime, but people would go back and forth. They would go shopping. You couldn't load up your car and all your kids and your TV and your money from the bank and your furniture and go across. They wouldn't let you do that. You'd have to go only with the shirt on your back, but you could still escape and you could be free. But then in 1961, your opportunity was gone. Grace's uncle was trapped in the East. He was a West German citizen, but he found himself a job in the East. And his family told him not to go, but he went because he had that job. And he woke up one day and he couldn't go home. And he waited until this next date, 1989. 1989 is when the wall finally came down. So if you didn't get out by 1961, you probably wouldn't get out until 1989. 2.5 million people fled East Germany before the wall was built. Only 5,000 made it out alive after it was built. The rest died trying or they were put in jail. So the lesson there is leave while it's easy. So how does this relate to us? The East Germans are not the only ones who are slaves. John 8:34 says there's another kind of slavery. And Jesus answered him, "Most assuredly I say to you, whoever commits sin is a slave of sin." Galatians 1:4 says that this is present evil age. This is Satan's world. So we're in a state of sin. The world around us is. The world is trapped in that state. It's an evil dictatorship as much as Russia or East Germany was, except it wasn't Stalin in charge. It's Satan who is in charge of our world. So the thing is, for the young people in this room, they can get out. The wall has not yet been built. The young people in this room, your calling is now. You can choose to go God's way, and you can live outside of the world. You're still in the world, but you're not of it And everybody in this room can make a decision whether they want to be of this world or not. So, like I said, there's an easy way and a hard way. The East Germans, they had a choice. In 1945, they had a choice. Should I leave now, or is it too much of a pain to leave my possessions? I got to get new furniture and find a new apartment, a new job. It's a pain. It's a sacrifice to leave what you have and go to the West. But it's so much more of a sacrifice to have to climb a wall and get shot at in order to leave. So when I say you have an easy choice or a hard choice, it's not that it will be impossible to choose God's way 10 years or 20 years down the road, but you're going to be entrenched in whatever way of life you choose. So if you don't choose God's way of life now, 10 years down the road, depending on how old you are, you're going to be married to someone else, not in the church, and have kids. You're going to have a circle of friends. You're going to have a type of job. You're going to have a whole lifestyle, and you're going to have entrenched habits. And for you to go back to God's way of life, you're going to have to change all those habits, maybe change your job, maybe have strife with your family. It wouldn't be the first time that families are disrupted because somebody says, no, I want to follow God. That's the present evil age that we're in, and we can decide, each one of us can decide to respond to God's calling now or not to do it. And since your parents are in the church, you're sanctified and you're called. You have that opportunity that you can respond to or not respond to. So I have a couple of points. After all, what do you do? What if you choose to respond now? How do you do that? A couple of really quick points. One is to simply choose that. Resolve to follow God. Resolve to follow God. One person who did that was Josiah. In 2 Chronicles 34, verse 41, then the king, this Josiah, stood in his place and made a covenant before the Lord to follow the Lord and to keep his commandments and his testimonies and his statutes with all his heart and his soul, to perform the words of the covenant that were written in this book. And Josiah was not an adult when he became king and when he found the law and decided to go God's way. He was a child. You can't just think that that's for somebody else or that's for another time, because it's not. The second point is to pursue baptism. Pursue baptism. Acts 2:38, then Peter said to them, repent, let every one of you be baptized in the name of Jesus Christ for the remission of sins. So that is the one thing that you can do that announces your commitment, or the one thing that where you're publicly making the commitment and saying, yes, I'm going to follow God. I'm not just going to talk about it or think of it in my future or go to Sabbath services. This is when you're really making that commitment. The third point is to become biblically literate. In other words, read the Bible. Read some of the Bible every day. The creator of the universe wrote that book for you. What's in it is for you. It's not just for those who come up and give sermonettes and sermons. It's not just for Mr. Bornhorst. It's not just for your parents. The Creator wrote it for all of His creation, and all of you who are being called, that book is for you. Now, Josiah was at a disadvantage when he became king. He didn't have the book of the law. He wanted to read the Bible, but he didn't have it because it got lost. And then he rejoiced. Everybody rejoiced when they found the book because it was such a special thing. They were worried. He was worried God wasn't happy with them. They weren't following God because they didn't even know how. They didn't have the book. All of us in this room have the book. And we should not take it for granted. We should read the book. Everybody at whatever level he can read the book, you should do it. Last point is to pray to your Father. Pray to your Father. Luke 21:36 says, pray always. So praying always doesn't mean to stand up and listen to the opening prayer and the closing prayer, or the prayer before you eat your meal. Those are all good things, but nobody else can pray for you. Nobody else can get baptized for you. Nobody else can eat and digest your food for you. Some things you just have to do for yourself. You can't rely on somebody else to get into the kingdom or to live God's way. You have to do it yourself. That's part of making your parents' religion your religion. If Josiah would have just relied on his parents, he would have been a pagan. He wouldn't have bothered looking for the book of the law and trying to please God. He would have just followed along. But that's not what he did. The last slide that I have for you is a bunch of happy people. End on a happy note. These are ecstatically happy people, and the reason that they are happy is because that is the 9th of November, 1989. That's when the wall finally came down. Those people are happy because they're free. For 27 years, they were trapped behind that wall. For more than 40 years, they were in a dictatorship. But then, finally, they were in a free country. The wall may have still been there as a physical object, but there was no guard at the top of it shooting them when they climb over. So you can see in the picture the East Germans climb over the wall. They shake hands with the West Germans. It's an amazing time that they went through. Freedom is good. Happiness is good. But how much better would it have been for all those people in the picture if they had gotten out when they could have, if they had chosen the right path and chosen freedom when they could have? All those wasted years could have been avoided. So you, all of you listening, especially all the young people, the unbaptized people, you have that opportunity now. You have your calling now. So seize it.